Hey everybody, it's Party Elite with another episode of Total Breakdown. Today's battle is from the ongoing tournament over at Clan Community, where Daman's Wood Elves take on the Dwarfs of FoolishMan. Once again, just a quick mention that if you want to be a part of a Total War community that hosts great competitive play, you should check out Clan Community by following the link in the description below. Orion leads the Wood Elves with Cloak of Isha and Foe Seeker, while his Spellsinger of Life comes in with Earthblood and a Scroll of Shielding. 2 units of Dryads, 2 units of Eternal Guard with shields, 3 units of War Dancers, and 2 units of Wildwood Rangers bring a decent amount of armor piercing, with a balance of units having very high melee attack and some with very high melee defense. The high melee attack is extremely helpful, especially when your opponent has relatively high melee defense on average, and armor piercing is a natural pick against the Dwarfs. 4 units of Glade Guard come in with regular arrows, as there's no need to bring fire damage or magical damage the Dwarfs can resist, while the Wild Riders with shields can hold against heavy ranged fire, can chase routing units, and can take care of enemy range support as well. A Dwarf Lord leads the Dwarfs with a Potion of Toughness. His Runesmith brings the Master Rune of Stromny Redbeard, the Rune of Wrath and Ruin, and the Rune of Negation, while his Thane comes in to provide melee support. The army has gone low cost, high count with plenty of fire damage embedded to help battle trees. 2 units of miners with blasting charges, 4 units of dwarf warriors, Ekrund miners, and 3 units of longbeards form a large infantry contingent, with the longbeards able to spread encouragement through the ranks. 4 units of rangers will be hidden for a great part of the initial approach and can cause a lot of range damage to health and morale, while the thunderers will be able to pick out armored enemy units to fire upon. Ulthar's Raiders will cause armor-piercing damage in ranged and in melee engagements if it comes to it, and Marked by Ulthar can make a massive difference with such a large ranged contingent. Finally, the Goblobber will hope to force the enemy to be aggressive, while also reducing enemy leadership by a further 16 with the Discouraged trait. Alright, as always, we're going to start with a conversation about deployment, and both generals deploying in a fashion that is, I would say, characteristic of either race. So let's start with the Wood Elves, actually, on the left side over here. Again, both parts, as you can see, hidden within the tree. So we're going to start with this left melee contingent over here. We've got Orion leading the charge alongside the Spellsinger of Life, and right behind them we have the, let's see here, we've got the Eternal Guard with shields up front, the Dryads right behind them, then right behind them we have the 3 units of War Dancers, and all the way at the back we do have the Wildwood Rangers as well. Now I think this is less of an engagement layout and more of a marching layout. They want to be able to sneak through the gap over here and make sure they're able to get through the woods and stay hidden all the way through and not get spotted, while on the other side we have the ranged and mobility contingents as well. The cavalry up front first, the Wild Riders with shields of course, as well as the Glade Guard right behind them, all 4 units back here. Everything tucked away, nice and hidden, able to push in and come in from very surprising angles and cause a lot of trouble among the dwarfs. Now let's take a look at the dwarf layout as well. Again, very characteristic, very defensive, hoping to hold the ground and keep their range contingent protected. On either side, we have these dwarf warriors up front protecting the front entry points, while at the back we have the dwarf warriors here and over here, again, just providing defense from any rear charges. Longbeards closing the gap off back here, while up front we have the Thunderers opening shots off, supported by the Thane. If push comes to shove and something comes charging in, the Thane will be able to hold the charge back, while at the back, Ulthar's Raiders will be able to get some shots off as well, supported by these Rangers, a pair on either side. And again, if push comes to shove and the enemy charge makes it through, the Ulthar's Raiders can hold their ground in melee. Most Dwarf range units can do that, but Ulthar's Raiders are a bit more capable, of course, with their armor-piercing damage in melee. So these guys would be able to hold the charge, and then everything can collapse in if anything decides to charge through that way. And all the way back here as well, we do have Ekrund's miners, as well as the miners with blasting charges. Again, these guys able to get some decent coverage with their blasting charges to get some of that fiery damage in there. In the center, all the way in the middle, we have the Runesmith, of course, able to provide the rune support. Very necessary, very good positioning there as well, while the Lord is sort of covering this entry point, able to push in wherever necessary, very central deployment. And finally the Goblobber, unfortunately idle at first because there's nothing to fire at, but in the middle, hoping to get that damage in nice and early, but unfortunately, like I said, there's nothing to fire at because the Wood Elves have deployed on either flank, planning this very prolonged maneuver to get in from either side. And again, just great play there, playing to faction strength. These guys can just move through the woods, no problem. They can come in from either side and open shots off. So I guess predicting that there would be an artillery contingent on the other side, and more so, I guess, trying to do something a little different here. So we're just going to kick it up a notch, speed it up a little bit. just for the purpose of this opening section here, as everyone gets into position, you can see these guys actually stay hidden as they push through the neck over there. Over here as well, the Wild Riders just getting into position as the Glade Guard get into position. Nothing spotted just yet. Everything's still hidden. And the Dwarfs know something's up. They just don't know what is happening. And this is excellent because you'll see the entire Dwarf army is now facing one direction, so they're probably predicting an approach from a single side, but, you know, little do they know, of course, that there's a two-pronged approach coming in, so just really nicely played. Now the Wild Riders do reveal themselves, and they're actually able to come in and get some charges in if they wanted to, get some rear charges into these Dwarf Warriors, and the Glade Guard push out as well as Orion, so letting the opponent know right away that there is going to be trouble here, and you'll see the Goblobber open shots off right away, getting some damage into the Glade Guard over here. A nice hit there, and again, with the artillery fire as well as Discouraged kicking in, these guys are going to start falling apart pretty quickly. You can see the morale damage a single hit did there, so good pick there, especially since you're trying to take care of enemy range as quickly as possible. Now, the Glade Guard do start firing at the Thunderers. Not a bad idea. There's a massive clump there, so that's going to work out. You know, spread the damage, even misses count as hits, but beyond that, of course, it is a little bit wasteful or unideal. I don't want to call it wasteful. It's not ideal because these Rangers over here are opening shots into the Glade Guard, and you can see they're taking a little bit of damage right now, and over time, obviously, that's going to become a bit of a problem, and it's mostly a problem because the Glade Guard have a range of 170, the Rangers have a range of 160, so these guys could actually have been pulled back just a little bit and tried to get some shots off, you know, hope to split the army apart, bait these Rangers out potentially, chase while giving chase to the Glade Guard, allowing the Wild Riders to come in and charge. But unfortunately, they're just kind of standing there, looking pretty, and eating shots as they obviously exchange fire. Now, the Thunderers are taking some damage, so not bad there. Meanwhile, over here, you'll see Orion under a rain of blasting charges there, taking some hurt, but baiting the Miners into firing into Orion. One Earthblood will recuperate that. That's not a problem at all. And meanwhile, the Miners there wasting their charges. So great play there. Meanwhile, you'll see over here, between the artillery fire and all the range fire, that unit of Glade Guard already giving up. And meanwhile, look down here. These guys have taken a lot of damage, basically a quarter of their health left. So they're falling back now. So again, if they just stayed away, kept distance, and baited the Rangers out, it would have worked out a lot better for the Wood Elves. Meanwhile, you'll see the rest of the army has pushed out and is now getting ready for engagements, while the Wild Riders over here as well pushing in. Orion keeping a safe distance but getting shot at by these Thunderers, who have been pretty well hurt. The Glade Guard as well still pushing away, needing to pull away. Now you'll see the Wild Riders here as well, opting obviously not to charge into these Dwarf Warriors, pulling away instead, trying to bait these guys apart, and they actually get hit by Marked by Ulthar. Meanwhile, over here you'll see some blasting charges go off into the War Dancers, giving them some cause for concern, but some of these Dwarf Warriors as well taking a little bit of damage there, while all the way over here still, the Glade Guard, though they're willing to fight once more, they're in a pretty precarious situation. Most of these guys have been largely taken care of. This unit still has about half health left, just a touch more, but in a tough spot. Meanwhile, though, you'll see the Rangers are trying to focus down on the Wild Riders over here. Again, Marked by Ulthar is absolutely great when you have such a large ranged contingent. The rest of the army, though, pushing forward. You'll see over here, we do have the Eternal Guard with shields trying to push through this little gap here and get into the Thunderers and shut them down once and for all. While up top here, we have these War Dancers holding the Dwarf Warriors in place, and these War Dancers holding these Longbeards in place. So, very good situation for the Dwarfs overall, but these Eternal Guard are having a bit of a tough time getting shot up by these blasting charges, trying to hold them back, trying to buy the Thunderers some time, but unfortunately they're also taking some hits from the blasting charges, and inevitably the Eternal Guard are going to be able to close that gap, while the Dryads over here trying to provide some support to these War Dancers. Meanwhile, you'll notice the Runesmith is actually back there. The Thane is over here not getting involved. He's just too far away from this combat situation to be fully effective with the splash damage that heroes can cause. If the the Thane had just been brought in from the rear here, could probably help defeat these War Dancers relatively easily compared to what's going on right now. Meanwhile, you'll see up top here, the Glade Guard are again back in the fray, opening shots off at the Rangers, and these Rangers have actually let themselves get isolated, so they're in a rough spot. And take a look at this unit down here of Wild Riders and this unit up here of the Rangers as we kick in at full speed. Just look at the amount of damage these guys are absorbing. Their shields are worth nothing because of Marked by Ulthar. Of course, their armor is reduced as well as their resistance, of course, but they go pushing in and they charge into the Rangers, get a decent amount of work done. Meanwhile, up there, those Rangers are being completely focused down on by the Glade Guard, and great call there, making sure that at least one unit of Rangers gets completely taken care of, and meanwhile with the Wild Riders down here, a second unit as well. So good management there, trying to shut down that range support, always important, I always preach that. And over here, Orion is currently dealing with some Dwarf Warriors, while over here we do have the Wildwood Rangers pushing in as well, trying to get the Longbeards in position to intercept their approach. Meanwhile, In this clump over here, we have some more blasting charges going off as the Thunderers were able to pull back and stay safe from the Eternal Guard. Earthblood does go down to try and keep these guys alive, the War Dancers and the Eternal Guard as well. Earlier on is always better for Earthblood, as you guys well know by now, and unfortunately the Runesmith drops a Rune of Negation, but could have actually pushed forward a touch or pushed further up this way just by a little bit, because some of these units that could have been hit by the Rune of Negation are not getting it. They're not having that extra support come in. So while some of these guys do have that rune for just a little bit longer, other units that could have used that assistance missed out, and it could have easily been solved by the Runesmith just tucking over just a touch more. Meanwhile, over here, Ulthar's Raiders do get hit by the Wild Riders as well, so again, a lot of damage done there, trying to shut down that range support. Meanwhile, these guys, these Rangers, have been completely obliterated, largely taken care of with all that focus fire coming down. So good job there isolating the Rangers, but unfortunately the Glade Guard had to take a lot of damage for that to eventually happen. Meanwhile, you'll see the Spellsinger of Life relaxing back there, trying to stay safe, while Orion here is in the thick of things. The Dwarf Warriors are going to try beating away at him, while you'll see here a rear charge comes in from the Wild Riders, doing a decent amount of damage to the Longbeards, of course, to morale and to health. So great movement there, keeping the Wild Riders very active, pushing them into the Rangers, and then pulling them back down into Ulthar's Raiders, and then further down into the Longbeards, and again pulling them up to hit Ulthar's Raiders once more, just to get them to fall apart. And you'll see we have a full surround actually going on with the Wood Elves coming in from all these sides now. The Dryads up here, making sure these Rangers are unable to fire, and all the way up here we do have the Wildwood Rangers bogging down these Longbeards. Now, you'll notice these Dwarf Warriors are simply not doing anything. They're kind of bogged down over here by the Eternal Guard, and this unit of Miners aren't doing anything either. They really should have been, pushed in one way or another just to provide support to this strangely curved front line. Same thing goes for these Dwarf Warriors. Pull them up front or pull them back to hold these Dryads back so the Rangers can actually stay safe. And at the same time, you'll see this unit of Rangers have been completely broken. They're routing now under all of that ranged fire, but the Wild Riders do persist. They decide to push through, and great job popping the Scroll of Shielding on them as well, as they were engaged with Ulthar's Raiders. Those guys, again, they are armor-piercing and melee. They have a decent melee attack as well, so you want to try and keep your Wild Riders alive in that situation. So, Scroll of Shielding, great call. Meanwhile, you'll see the Ekron's Miners, always mispronounce that, tossing their blasting charges into these Dryads. Of course, the fire damage is going to help against the wood, but there's a huge clump here as well, so it's just helpful to spread some of that love across these units, but not doing enough with the blasting charges. And you'll see, as I mentioned again, these guys are routing. The Runesmith now trying to dive in on the Wild Riders, trying to get some hurt in there, but of course the Wild Riders are able to get away very easily. Meanwhile, the Goblobbers still popping shots off at a far away, very distant unit of Glade Guard, if I can even find them. They've completely shattered. They don't even have a flag anymore, but still trying to get some hits off on them. So again, a little bit of mismanagement there. I wouldn't even call it micro, that's just macro. The Goblobber should have been firing either into these guys, again, to prevent that ranged fire like was done earlier, or into some of these infantry units that have clumped up and would be beautiful targets for large rocks with goblins strapped on them. Meanwhile, you'll see here these Dryads were able to push through, of course, as they frighten the Rangers away. They're able to push through, and now they're going to occupy the Miners, and the Miners will do all right against the Dryads, but by keeping them occupied, they're not going to be able to throw their blasting charges anymore. Meanwhile, the Glade Guard persist opening fire on various range units, while down here we have the Wild Riders pushing in to support Orion. They are hit by the Rune of Wrath and Ruin, so good use of ruins. Of course, you want to reduce that weak unit and try and finish it off completely, but you will see over here we have a wonderful Earthblood go down, making sure that the Wild Riders stay within range of it. Orion and the Wild Riders getting some help there, so good work. Meanwhile, these Dryads chasing after these Rangers, making sure they don't come back, so again, just keep that route going. Make sure that range units especially aren't able to return, and fire from a distance, and then keep yourself focused on the rest of the engagement, because you don't have to deal with range units afterwards. Meanwhile, Orion over here diving into these Miners, providing some support to these Wildwood Rangers, and really the Runesmith, again, just not involved enough. Should be chasing after Orion right now. Dwarf Lord in a bit of trouble as Orion comes in and starts beating on him as well. So overall, the leadership was not managed well. And down here now, you'll see the Goblobbers being focused on. These Rangers have come back, and these Longbeards over here just standing there, eating some shots from the Glade Guard. Just a little bit of mismanagement. Meanwhile, down here, the Runesmith pops. The Rune of Negation would have been much more helpful up here. There are 4 units up here that could have benefited from that rune, or even pushed down a little bit further this way and help the Lord out. Unfortunately, though, the Runesmith being very selfish, just helping himself and a couple of Miners here with the Rune of Negation. Up here, meanwhile, these Longbeards made to rout once more, while this unit of Rangers are basically done for, while the Dryads continue to chase after some of these Rangers, making sure they do not return, as I said before. Down here, you'll see the Ekron Miners have been taken care of. The Spellsinger of Life still very safe, now pushing into combat if necessary. I guess safe enough to do so now. Meanwhile, up here you will see the Rune of Wrath and Ruin again, just trying to take care of the Dryads. Not the worst target. There were some better spots to put that down on. Maybe these Wildwood Rangers would be a more ideal target. And the Glade Guard as well, maybe spending a little bit too much time on these Longbeards. Could have been pulled down to focus down on some of these warriors over here and just provide some extra support in these more central engagements. Meanwhile, another Earthblood does go down on some of these very important units. Of course, keeping Orion alive, helping the Wild Riders stay alive, as well as Eternal Guards and these Dryads. But once again, the Runesmith, again, able to take care of the Dryads, which isn't bad, but too much time wasted on pointless engagements. Should have been pulled in earlier to deal with Orion, for example. Meanwhile, you'll see the Spellsinger as well, having a good time here. Just having a ball, nice little party with Orion, causing a decent amount of damage. And at this point, the Wood Elves really have the upper hand. Runesmith still around, the Thane is still around as well, also very underutilized, unfortunately, throughout this battle, but the Wood Elves are trouncing the Dwarfs quite handily. Once more, we do see the Wildwood Rangers the Wild Riders get hit by the Rune of Wrath and Ruin, just causing a little bit more damage, persisting with that, but just not doing enough. And again, we have the Rune of Negation going down in the middle here, this time able to help the Lord, but the Lord is so low on leadership, completely surrounded. 22% resistance isn't going to do enough in the situation that they currently find themselves in. So this is really when you should GG, when you're that far down the rabbit hole. Ultimately, the Dwarfs do lose, and it's a Pyrrhic victory for the Wood Elves. Now, I thought that was an amazing deployment and overall approach from the Wood Elves. The Dwarfs were boxed up, artillery at the ready, but it barely got the use it was hoping for because of that extremely sneaky approach through the trees. The Goblobber barely got 64 kills, and sure, it did a little bit more in terms of morale damage and tactical support on the battlefield, but it was very underutilized for its cost. The Wood Elves knew that the Dwarfs wouldn't be aggressive enough to scout the trees and safely set up an ambush from both sides. Unfortunately, the Wood Elves didn't use their superior range well enough, instead allowing the Rangers with their shorter range to hurt the Glade Guards severely. Of course, they still won the day, but at a cost. The Thane was underutilized and a waste of money as a result, while the Dwarf Lord showed little initiative until much later into the battle. At the same time, the Runesmith also wasted many of his runes, not affecting as many units as possible. Lacking Slayers also meant that any enemy large units would have a field day once lines were disrupted, and the two-pronged approach did that almost immediately. As always, make sure you subscribe to this channel for more Total War content and keep sending in those battle replays. Said it countless times, I think it is one of the best ways to learn, and it's always great to highlight some interesting battles from the Total War community. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the battlefield.